All right, guys, joining me right now, a composer of many things. I know the guys, our title guys that we had set up to do the graphics for us, says horror composer, but truthfully, this guy has done a ton of different composing genres of music, but most notably to you, our audience, horror movie Initiation. That is, I believe we'll ask him when he gets here right now if it is readily available. I think it is. Definitely looks cool, looks like a good one. But let me introduce to you the composer of that film, Mr. Alexander Arntzen. How you doing, sir?
Doing good. Good to be here.
So this film, like I said, this this movie, like it looks very like college slasher, like almost like a Scream type vibe, where these guys are being initiated into their fraternity, and I suppose girls getting initiated into their sorority, and there's some hijinks like tag the girls that you know are messing around a lot and stuff. Just in the trailer, you're getting this, so you know that over the course of them being initiated into their respective houses, that of course, it being a horror movie, that something creepy is going to happen. And I can tell you that the one thing that caught my eye, that always does when it comes to like a slasher, is the style in which they look and the weapon of choice. And this dude's weapon of choice is pretty freaking gnarly. It's like looks like a big like drill or bit or something.
Yeah, it's a power drill. Also, I talked to the director, John Berardo, and we were able to, I decided to actually implement like the sound of a drill slowly getting louder in the score, actually, as part of the soundtrack.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Sort of like as the killer is getting closer, like the drill gets louder, especially near the finale when everything gets crazier and crazier. But yeah, no, I mean, it's very astute of you about obviously, you know, you have the two sorority and fraternity. And because originally, actually, the film was originally called based off of the short film Dembanger. It was a totally different name, which Dembanger actually means exclamation point, which is, you know, unfortunately, most people won't know that. So that's probably why for marketing purposes, Initiation worked really well. And I think I love the new name. I think it's great. You know, on some level, also, Initiation means the beginning of something. Which for myself is like a deeper meaning, because actually this was the first film that I released like a full soundtrack album for ever.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
I have done other features. I've done obviously a lot of other films, but like this is the first film where I really felt like this score really, I think, deserved its own little platform to be listened to on a larger scale, which is fun. But the cool thing is, this is a very long-time collaborator, John Berardo, that I've worked with since I was literally like a senior in high school. We met. He was working at Apple. He was like showing me how to use Final Cut Pro, and I just asked him, you know, do you do since he was showing me an editing program, like do you make films or anything? And so I started scoring his first short film back in high school, and we've just been working together ever since. And obviously this to be out there. And yes, I think you mentioned before, it is out in select theaters. It's on Amazon, on Apple TV, all pretty much any on-demand platform. It's all out there right now.
Right on, dude. Well, that is something that is pretty kind of cool to hear you say that, where you say that, you know, you've done other films and you've done other projects, but this is the one that you feel like really deserves its own piece of work. I know that feeling of like, the next one's always the next best one. I'm right before we were talking, I'm working, and you know, I'm putting a feature together right now, and the way that we're shooting it is we're shooting it in thirds, and so playing around with the footage that we have for the middle third of what we have shot and so far, and just editing that and putting it together. You know, one of those things that just off the top, that when you're editing stuff, you have a deep appreciation for that music is able to convey so many different emotions in so many different situations, that I think that like when you're there in the theater, like I just went to the movie theater for the first time in like 18 months the other day, and the whole experience of like you're at the movie theater may take that away because you're just caught up in the moment of this film on this huge screen presented. Like everything blends well together. Like something like Avengers, like of course that score sticks out, but like a horror movie, if it's flowing and it's jiving well together, the music is definitely there to complement it. But it's almost like you may not even realize it because you're so caught up in like what's going on. But today, like looking at different music choices for a certain scene, I can tell you for this example, like it's something that's definitely, especially in horror movies, one of the first things you notice when it's not there.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the bar has now been set so high for horror scores that if it's not working, like you can tell really quickly, and the film can really fall apart pretty fast if the music isn't really complementing, alongside the action. And with this score, obviously social media is a big part of it. And so pretty much the entire score, outside of a couple of instruments, is almost entirely electronic and very sort of atonal. And just the overall vibe is just sort of this uncomfortable kind of bed of sounds. And then obviously, when the killer shows up, it gets much more visceral. There's more percussion. I actually use my own voice with like a rhythmic breathing pattern and like lower it like multiple octaves to sound like a monster. Which was kind of a fun thing that me and John talked about trying to do as well, just add this extra sort of layer to the score. But yeah, no, I mean, horror scores similar to comedy. It's like, those are like the two genres where you have to have a desired outcome to the audience or else you have failed. Like there's not really any other genres where like if you don't scare them, you failed. Certainly they need to have a feeling of unease. If they don't have that feeling of unease at minimum, you need that, throughout the film.
Yeah, there is definitely almost like you mentioned comedy, it's almost like a formulaic like sense of the horror score too. Like there's so many, I hate to call them tropes, but it's almost like a horror fan trope to an audio listener, like the slow riser, or the startle scare, the whoop, or whatever it may be. Like when someone, my dog's looking at me like I'm a maniac right now. But there are those things that like similar to like someone jumping out of a boo hole in a haunted house. Like they're going to be there, and it's almost like you appreciate them more because they're going to be there. And filmmakers and crews and whatnot use them for to their advantage. And when I was actually looking at horror risers today from a buddy of mine who does electronic stuff, and then the age-old option of independent filmmaking of like royalty-free, buy my portfolio and everything else. But like, lo and behold, in front of me, there's like 20 different choices of horror risers that I was listening to. But for you and anyone who gets to compose a horror movie, like these are like the thoughts that go into your head, man, of like, okay, so horror movie riser, we're at a fraternity. You mentioned your electronic buzz on it, and that's definitely, you look at the movie trailer and the vibe of your music comes through definitely with the tone as like the pans of like the different screenshots of the phones. That's very cool. But
yeah,
how, when it comes to something like, like a stinger or, something that, like this is a crucial part in the movie, and like dude with the drill is going to scare the hell out of someone in the audience. Like in your mind, like what is that like to compose? That was something that crossed my mind.
Well, I think, as you said about like, especially with comedy and horror, there are these sort of tropes and stereotypes and cliches that everyone kind of knows. And like, you're not, to think that you're somehow going to entirely reinvent the wheel, I think is probably a bit too egotistical. So it's like, you have certain rules, you want to try to use the rules, but you want to try to spread it out and maybe use some of those expectations to your advantage, and to try to stretch out the suspense as much as possible. Really, because they know they're going to get a certain thing potentially when they go to a horror movie. It's like, any movie a person goes to, like, they expect hopefully certain things to happen, but hopefully also something unexpected. And I'm hoping, especially near the end of the movie, I'm hoping people get some really unexpected kind of cool things. But, our job as creative people, especially these days, 100+ years into filmmaking, is like, how can we stretch out the genre to make it so that it keeps you a little further from guessing. Like, it's not, sometimes it's not even having music. So sometimes it's just like there's nothing there, and all of a sudden just a loud noise comes out of nowhere. So there is no timing. There is no way to prepare the audience for, like, oh, the bad guy's coming. It's like, and there are a couple moments in the score where either there's no music or the music seems as if it's like, kind of going away. Like, oh, okay, I guess, it wasn't even really rising. It was just kind of there, and now it's just kind of fading away. So you're thinking you're done, and then bam, it's like you want to do that as much as possible, because like that certainly, that is part of the name of the game, especially with this genre, is to scare people a little bit, and hopefully also with this movie in particular to make people think about certain things. And so if we can accomplish that, we're doing a good job.
So with this movie, was this your first horror project that is getting released on this scale?
Trying to think. I have scored a couple of other horror and psychological, like, thriller films, but those have not been released yet. So yes, this for horror feature film, like, this is the first, like, large scale horror feature film feature released, widely. Yeah. And with that, when you're entering the genre, I always like to ask people whether they're just entering, or if they've been in 100 different horror films, but more notably when they're just entering the genre, like, was horror something when you were going back? I mean, you mentioned you started writing music in high school, but like when you started off that partnership, mentorship with your friend, did you like say at one point, like, man, like, I hope I'm getting to compose horror movies? Like, were you a horror movie fan back from childhood to now, or was there another one that kind of led you, into film composer? I mean, and it's a bit of a cop-out statement, but similar to music, like, I like good movies. I like good music. So like, it doesn't need to, like, it's about the execution. It's about a cool idea. It's like, it's the people that are making it. It's like, I want to, like, I want to be entertained. And if that means it's entertainment in this genre, then great. If it's entertainment in this genre, like, everything has something to offer. I like to keep it very varied as much as possible. I have done a lot of horror, actually, but ironically, I am like the biggest scaredy cat when it comes to horror, actually. Like, I actually really can't watch horror movies that I don't score. Like, I'm the person in the audience like this, the entire movie. Like, I can't do it. So, once I watch movies I'm scoring, I kind of get it out of my system, because I've kind of seen the things that are going to scare me. And now I get to basically scare people all over again, which is, kind of fun. And it is this weird thing where eventually, like, it comes this point where you're not sure if you've just gotten so used to it or not. You have to, you're second guessing yourself sometimes near the end. Like, is this still scary? Is this still working? Because, the scare factor is just go, the more you've watched it, the more it's getting further and further away. Obviously also in post-production, you're watching it without VFX, without necessarily color correction to sound design. So like, you're only really outside of the visual image, like, the only other post-production that really is being put on it is your work. And you're just like, okay, I want to make sure, at least, I'm sure that the sound design is going to kill it. I'm sure that, no pun intended, but I'm sure that all the different other post guys are going to do their job. But hopefully, like, the music, can serve a certain goal with what it needs to do to, scare people and move the needle.
The fact of, with your answer right there, is like, you put into perspective how many different layers go into making a film in total, where, just in your thing, like, just to appreciate the fact that you're composing this. So when you're composing it, are you not hearing any Foley and or sound design by the time you're seeing what you're seeing?
Very rarely. I mean, especially on a feature film, I just don't think it's possible. Sometimes on some short films, I'm brought in very late, so they actually have everything done. But almost always, I'm always scoring to picture, no VFX, no color correction. It's just been edited. Basically, it's locked or it's close to locked, and then I might have to change the music if it's still getting edited on the fly. But yeah, so I mean, I had actually scored a Harry Potter fan film many years ago called Snape Marauders, and it, I had to score this entire like wizard duel, and there's no VFX at all, and so like it's one of those things where, and it's the same thing with this, because there's a lot of social media VFX that I never see that I have to kind of play, and that's part of why I wanted to make sure the music was electronic sounding, because I knew that what was going to be shown on screen was going to be tons of Instagram and tweeting and all sorts of electronic imagery floating around the screen, flying here, flying there. So like, since I already talked to John, the director, like I just knew, okay, I need to, knowing what I know is going to be there later, I need to just already build it in now, because I can't wait for it to be there. I just have to kind of know, I have to know and trust that they're going to do their part and make it a certain way. And I'm just going to build a sound bed that I think would be appropriate with what I'm expecting to see.
We did like a COVID fan film movie theater watch along thing last summer when all the theaters were closed, and how we would do it just like how we're doing this, and then we would put the fan film in, and we would leave us in, and then we would stream it, and link the sites and everything in the post on the page on our Facebook, and say like, hey man, like we're all going to the movies together, watch along with us. And it was between the one that you composed and the one that we ended up doing for Potter Week. And now it makes me want to go check out the Snape and the Marauders film even more now, knowing that you put your touch on there. But the thing too with thinking about that, you have to imagine that if you're not having it necessarily with the Foley guys just for hair's sake, let's pretend they don't have any of your stuff at their disposal yet. I gotta say, your side of it is way harder, because a Foley guy, and I'm not discrediting, sound editing or effects or anything at all. Like that, audio to me is one of the, if not the hardest part in the editing game. And but to me, like if I see like your guy with the power drill and he's going through somebody's shoulder, like I can Foley something up, but I feel like the music or the right music is I can hear that effect again and again or whatever. Like that would make the process, I would think, a little bit more easier. But for you to go in with the pantomiming, just the acting, like, man,
I mean, unless they take the sound design in a very experimental way, certainly. And I've never really done any sound design, so I can't really speak to it entirely, although I've talked to sound designers and been around it enough to kind of get an idea. Obviously, there's certainly a lot of fundamental sound design that just has to be done. There's a process that just has to be done a certain way for it to be technically appropriate for what you see on screen, like hitting, you see a door close, you hear the door close, which right. In production. But with music, the challenge can be that it's very subjective. You could go a million and one directions. Now, usually per genre, you're hopefully getting into some box, although it's still a pretty big box, horror. And then from there, it's like, well, what is it? Is it supernatural horror? Is it this horror? Is it that horror? Like, okay, maybe it narrows a little bit further, but still, there's still a lot of different colors to choose from in terms of the sound. And so, but I actually, when I'm working, like the scariest thing would be that a director says you can do anything you want, because having all of the choices is having none of the choices, basically. Like, right. It's actually, then it's like, it's paralysis, basically, like creative paralysis, because like now you have too many different things. You want like a multiple choice A, B, C, D, like choose one and let's start moving forward, kind of, and maybe sort of a binary of going back and forth between two different ideas, kind of, and seeing kind of what sticks properly. But that's part of why a lot of times before a composer starts scoring, there's temp music. And I did ask John to temp the score, partly with some of my own music, actually, from another horror film that I had done, a sports horror film. But that helps a lot, because, it immediately kind of gives you this, again, it narrows the box a little bit further. So now you have like a more clear parameter of like, the social media, okay, electronic, horror film, you want, but we also wanted to have a certain level of like kind of excitement and sort of momentum when kind of some of the crazier stuff is happening, sort of more pulsating kind of rhythmic effects later on. But yeah, so that it can be challenging, but I think over time, I think I've sort of learned how to help narrow down what sometimes can be a little overwhelming to start and kind of make it a little bit of a process. But then the great thing is I try to be very technical at the start, but then that allows me then to be very creative, because now I have like the tools. Now I know exactly kind of where my parameters are, like sort of like what is the mission essentially, you know, and now I can actually execute it properly.
Right on, man. Like the process in which you like to do your writing before the pandemic, and getting to talk to a couple different composers over the last couple months, they all seem to have a different answer. I'm sure it'd be different in whatever area it is, just like every director is not going to direct the same way. But before the pandemic, when it was more available, I guess, to you, did you like to visit the set a lot as you were coming up with the music, or did you stay away until you were getting the footage, you know, delivered to you?
It depends on the film. With Initiation, actually, I was able to visit the set one time, in sort of like the frat house set. So that was really fun. But it was more just out of fun than necessarily research. I didn't necessarily need to be there to have to like, you know, it helped. It certainly created a character, but sometimes it can actually, in some ways, hurt because you're seeing behind the curtain. Like really, because like the audience isn't going to see that. They're just going to see, you know, yes, eventually they might see behind the scenes, but that's not the point. The main product is the film. So like, I'm like meeting the people, this person or that person who might get murdered in 2 seconds, you know? So it's like, it's a very strange thing of like, you know, you're talking to them 1 second, the next second they're splattered with blood. Yeah. So, you know, on some level, you almost want to be a little bit like tunnel vision with it. But I mean, I can separate it pretty easily. I mean, and I know some composers like to score to picture, even as it's like in very rough stages of edit. And sometimes it's necessary. Like there's a couple of projects that are coming up that I'm working on that the turnaround is so quick that it would be a bit risky to only start scoring like a week out of it basically having to be finished. Like they're going to get like the project like is given to me and like very quickly it's turned around, like much closer to more of a TV schedule than a feature film schedule. And so, but in general, I prefer a shorter deadline because again, it's one of my little tools actually that actually sparks creativity rather than limits it. I find I'm more creative when you have sort of that proverbial gun to the head, like you need to get this done. There is no choice, like chance. Like a lot of times, if I have too much time, my mind can kind of like wander a little bit, and the procrastination can take over.
That's funny that you say that because we have an event coming up, and at this event, we're showing. I don't know if it's just going to be like a teaser, like segment, or we put together like a teaser trailer instead of a full trailer, whatever. But essentially, it's like 60 seconds of footage, like a scene or clip of a couple scenes of this thing that we're working on. And we've been done in between filming dates for like 3 weeks. And the whole time I've been staring at the computer, like thinking of like, okay, like sooner than later, I got to go through the footage to figure out what we should focus on. And I kind of like had the idea in the back of my head, like scene wise, like, okay, it's either this scene or that scene. And I'm like, I really should like go through the shot choices. I'm like, yeah, but I got this other shit that I got to do today. So,
you know, there's again, like there's going to be a dichotomy with everything. So obviously to take that to the extreme, to wait to the last second to start writing itself is a procrastination. Right. Like in a weird way, I'm actually procrastinating because I could technically start working on the project, but I'm basically saying I don't want to start working until the film is as close to locked, if not locked. So in a weird way, I'm actually selectively procrastinating by basically starting my deadline later in a certain sense. But I think it just depends because one thing I try to do if I have the time is the first day that I get a film and I kind of really spot it with the filmmaker and like kind of line up like where are all the cues going to be. And I've already probably talked to them. So I'm kind of, it's more of like a clerical thing than anything. I just have a program that kind of like literally just like, you know, music starts here, music ends here, music starts with all the different cues. And a lot of times I really prefer never to write music the first day I then watch it. Like I even, you know, listening to the temp music or not listening, I like to then make sure like that day I'm just kind of thinking about it. And then the next day overnight, I do think you do a lot of computation in your head, whether you realize it or not. So I very much believe in that process of like, let it marinate and then come back. And now you've got, you are running through, like you said, like you're running through things that you're going to do to it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to do it possibly faster because you've already sort of you've like visualized, and you're kind of also running through what wouldn't work in your mind, at least what you think might not work. So you can sort of cross some of those thoughts out. So when you get there, you can be more efficient.
It's your own little personal pitch process.
It is like, it's like, it's just, you're walking around, you take a walk, or you're in the shower the next day, and just like, you're getting ready, and you're just slowly like, okay. And, by the time you kind of get ready and go to battle, you have the game plan. You've now thought about it. It's not like a half-cocked idea. Like, it's all the way there. And usually that works. And if not, then you go to plan B and you start trying to figure out why it's not working. But at the same time, like, I'm also a big believer in, once you start working, start throwing stuff out. Like, I don't know if you've read the book, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great book. It kind of changed my outlook on creative writing endeavors. Basically, like, I think a lot of like artistic people think like, oh, I'll only work like when the moment strikes me and I feel inspired. And it's like, that's not really how, people in the creative field really have to work. Like, I have more of a blue collar mindset. It's like, I have to produce X amount of minutes of music today, whether it's the best music I've ever written or not. Like, it has to get done. It is a job. I am being paid to do this. I'm being paid for creativity, but I'm also being paid for production. Bottom line, they're also paying me because I can get this done at the deadline and hopefully get it done well. And so at the end of the day, like, again, and that's just part of the motivation. It's like, and I think also if you have a more of a mindset like that, I think also the creativity will follow, even if you don't have it immediately, it'll slowly find you.
Mm-hmm. I think that the creatively minded person, no matter what they're creating, music, film, traditional art, painting, whatever, I think that it's just something like the way that like the mind is wired. Same goes for, an actor or even like a teacher or a police officer. Like, it's just the way I think each person's mind is wired. So I think like the creator, whatever their medium may be, it's probably a certain way everyone sees the world too. Like, it's just constantly turning in a certain form or fashion. Like, you may walk to the store and see, all these musical notes play out, and I may walk to the store and see like medium close up, extreme close up. Like, it's just kind of the way that it is,
No, absolutely. And I mean, I really do like to think to a certain extent like a filmmaker. Like, I really do try to come at it more from the perspective of like the filmmaker and how to make it a great film. And hopefully the music also is great, but like at the end of the day, like, it needs to serve what the film is trying to kind of produce. And hopefully both of those things are the same outlook.
The fact that you've gotten to do a Potter fan film, so you've been in the Potterverse, you've gotten to now do this slasher, college fraternity, sorority, almost looked like a modern take on an ode to the 80s horror type film. What I know you said, you mentioned that you have a couple forthcoming things, so the answer to the question may be in these forthcoming things, but is there like a fandom / like area of composing for film that you might not necessarily have done or are currently doing that like is another check, like this was really cool, or man, to do this would be really cool?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten lucky recently. I mean, probably my overall favorite genre, just because although I said like I find it easier to close the box a little bit more narrowly, so you don't have too many options to get paralyzed by. But I love sci-fi fantasy, which kind of opens the box much larger. But I like the genre, especially if the genre, I mean, obviously there's the traditional versions, but in general, I love anything that's hybrid. I also just like something that is a combination of two things. Like I mentioned, there's this like sports horror short film that I scored, and it's like combining, like when I say the phrase sports horror, people are like, sports horror, what is that? And it's about an MMA, it's a short film called Spirit, and it's about an MMA fighter who's like weight cutting before his thing, and it's like Black Swan. So like all of a sudden he sees like this demon sitting next to him in a sauna. And so it's very cool. It's like a really cool, it's like, it's not, it's not something you've seen before. And it's like, I always love, the fear is sometimes like you can have a great idea and then I execute it well. And you can see that lots of times, sadly. But when you have something that's a good idea and executed well, it's like you can't beat that. I also, fortunately, I scored a action, like a legit, like almost like a little bit of like a pseudo like Rambo throwback action movie in January that was shot in Sweden. Actually, it was like a Scandinavian action movie that hopefully will be coming out soon. I can't talk too much about it, but yeah, like that was really fun because usually the budget for action movies are so large that there's not as many of them out there. But there was kind of a weird confluence of events. Sweden was open, and they kind of put it together last summer. And I scored it in January, and it's hopefully going to come out sometime later this year. But that was really fun because I it's hard to get action on a demo reel. And now, I mean, in this movie, like the action is like, it's really good. So it's like that's really fun to have because like now if someone says, "Can you do an action movie?" It's like, boom,
That's awesome. What would you say is your turnaround time? So for the action feature film, how long did that take you?
Funny enough, actually, Initiation and the action movie, which is called Last Man Down, both of them were about a month. It was very fast. It had to be a little fast because of both of them. Initiation, just for various things. I mean, the funny thing is, I always seem to be the first person done in post. I mean, mind you, the sound person always has to be the last because they have to mix it. But I've always found VFX are like, it's like for some reason VFX like take a really long time to finish, depending on how many VFX there are in a movie. Like, I'll be in the mixing of the film and like the VFX haven't been finished yet, which seems impossible because how can they do all the sound design? How can the sound design be done if the VFX aren't finished? So, but I look at it, it's like a team sport, and it's like, it's a relay race, and like the post-production is the final anchor leg of the relay. And so it's like, it's time to book it, like post-production is hurry up and wait. Like, and I guess you could say the same with most of them, but it's like, the film takes years to develop and fund, and pre-production and production kind of all goes at a certain pace. And all of a sudden now they realize, we have a film. Like now it's time to let's get this thing, out there as, sooner than later. Sometimes that can drag out depending on the funding, and, with indie filmmaking, sometimes it can be a little bit slower, but with these two films, there were reasons why they wanted to get it out there, either for festival submissions or to get to the film market to buy it. And so there was an incentive, essentially. I find once there's an incentive, once there's like this reason why, it's like the timeline moves much faster because everybody kind of gets on board with we need to get it done by a certain time. But I mean, both of them took about a month each. With Initiation, so the action film wasn't as scary because I had done Initiation 2 years before. And I was like, well, I've done a feature film in a month. So I kind of knew I could do it. So Initiation was the first time scoring a feature film in a month that kind of then showed me that I could sort of pull that off if I needed to in the future.
Right on. And what do you think, man, to leave it at this, what do you think everybody, horror fans out there checking out Initiation are going to get out of it? Like, what do you think, this film does to the viewer, and why should people check it out?
Yeah, I mean, I know some people sometimes can be a bit skeptical and think, it's just this or it's just that, it's just like this or that. And hey, I think actually that goes to our benefit because, I mean, if you like those movies, then you're going to like this too. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And I think it's a modern version of some of those films that we all love. And so I think it's going to be a fun romp. There's a bit of a slow burn element to it, but it's for a good reason. And it's sort of like building up the, who done it, who is behind what's going on with all the murders. And I think the reveal is fantastic. Every time the whole ending sequence kind of gets going, I get goosebumps, between the visuals and the music and everything else. It's just I just think that the whole creative team did a really solid job building up to the end. And I think it really pays off really well. And from what I've seen of the reviews, almost no one can guess. Actually, I don't think anyone guessed it. Everyone was always shocked at who the person is. So it's really fun.
Well, right on, man. How can everybody, we've said everyone can check out Initiation on streaming services, maybe even in your local movie theater, check your listings. But how can everybody keep their tabs on what you've got going on, man?
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably the best place to follow me is on Instagram at my name, at Alexander Arntzen, Arntzen. And otherwise, I also have a SoundCloud, which is just SoundCloud / Alexander Arntzen. I have over 150 tracks of my music on there of various short films and features I've done. So, and I also do songwriting. So that's another thing. I actually just wrote a song about the potential closing of ArcLight just kind of my thoughts and feelings about, the memories going to, I go to the one in Sherman Oaks. And so I don't know whether it'll survive or not, but it seems like obviously it's in peril right now. So I kind of just wrote a song about that recently.
Right on. So on your SoundCloud, it's just Alexander Arntzen again?
Yeah, just / Alexander Arntzen. Yeah. Luckily that name is weird enough that it's not taken too widely.
You got your blue check mark with a circle on it easily.
Yes, exactly.
Well, Alexander, man, I look forward to checking out the film. Got to check out more of your music. But I thank you for coming on, and we will have to do it again down the road.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for talking.